Husband Mark passed away 3 years ago. I thought the hardest part was over. Together we had built Harrington Co. from nothing, just a dream, a tiny rented warehouse, and a lot of sleepless nights. A fine fabrics business that grew into one of the most trusted suppliers on the East Coast. Mark loved the business almost as much as he loved our son, David. In his will, he left David 80% ownership, believing, naively, that our son would honor our legacy and protect me, that he would lead with the same grit and loyalty we'd taught him. At first, it seemed he would. David grieved hard, but when he finally took the reins, he asked me to stay on as head of client relations, the face of the company. I thought we'd find our footing together, rebuild as a team. I was wrong. 6 months ago, David called a staff meeting and proudly introduced someone new, Brittany, his fiancé. Blonde, sharp-suited, all smiles and handshakes. Brittany's got an MBA, David gushed. She's going to help modernize operations. She's coming in as Senior Director of Business Development. I remember smiling tightly, feeling an invisible wall rise between us. Business development? In a company where relationships and trust mattered more than spreadsheets and modernization? After the meeting, I pulled David aside. Are you sure about this, honey? She's young, and our clients value experience. Loyalty. He brushed me off like a speck of lint on his designer jacket. Mom, times are changing. Brittany knows what she's doing. That was the first warning sign. The second came faster. Brittany started stepping over me almost immediately. She bypassed my directives, changed supplier agreements without my knowledge, and began streamlining client communication, which was just a fancy way of saying she ignored half of them. Every time I approached David, concerned, he waved it away. She's got fresh ideas, Mom. Just let her work. I tried until the day she snapped at one of our oldest, dearest clients. Mrs. Anders, right in the middle of the showroom. Mrs. Anders, whose family had kept us afloat during our lean years. Mrs. Anders, who placed bulk orders religiously every fall. Mrs. Anders, who walked out of that building that day, purse clenched tight, face flushed with anger, and never came back. I went straight to David's office, heart pounding. I laid it all out, what Brittany had done, what we were risking. You have to remove her, I said, voice trembling. Before she drives everything your father and I built into the ground. David sat back in his chair, folded his arms, and stared at me for a long moment. And then he said the words I'll never forget. Maybe it's not Brittany who's the problem. Maybe it's you. You've had your time, Mom. It's time to step down. The room spun around me. I looked at David, my son, my baby boy, and saw a stranger. And Brittany. Brittany stood just outside the door, pretending to shuffle papers, a satisfied little smirk playing on her lips. I wanted to scream, to remind him of the nights I stayed up balancing books, the weekends I spent driving deliveries when drivers quit, the sacrifices Mark and I made so he could have a future. But I didn't. I didn't say a word. I simply nodded, walked back to my office, packed up the framed photo of Mark and me that had sat on my desk for 28 years, and left. No fight. No tears. Not yet. But as I pulled out of the parking lot for the last time, the sun setting in a blaze of deep red over the horizon, one thought burned brighter than anything else. They think I'm done, but they have no idea what's coming. It took exactly 11 days. 11 days before the first cracks started showing at Harrington Co. The first hint came from an old friend, Martin O'Connor, who'd been with our company since the early 90s. He called me at home, his voice low and concerned. Linda, what's going on over there? I played dumb, polite but neutral. I'm no longer involved in the day-to-day, Martin. Why do you ask? He chuckled bitterly. Because Brittany just tried to renegotiate my contract, and she sent me a new rate sheet that would insult a kid mowing lawns. I swallowed a smile. Of course she did. Brittany wouldn't know a loyal client if one paid her rent for a year, which, frankly, most of them had. I'm sorry to hear that, I said simply. You're the reason I stayed this long, Linda. If you're out, maybe it's time I move on too. He hung up without waiting for an answer. That was the first call. They kept coming, each one a little angrier, a little more confused. Mr. Patel from Weston Manufacturing, our biggest supplier, furious that Brittany forgot a key meeting. The Anders brothers, longtime investors, stunned to find their quarterly reports riddled with typos and half-truths. Even sweet Mrs. Vaughn, who had been a client since I was 26, left a voicemail that broke my heart. Linda, dear, I don't understand what's happening. I trusted you. Now no one returns my calls. I don't feel safe with them anymore. The business Mark and I had built wasn't built on speed or flash. It was built on trust, on handshakes that meant something, on promises we kept. And David, blind, foolish David, had ripped all that apart in less than a month. I kept my distance at first, letting the house of cards collapse without so much as breathing on it. But then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, my phone rang again. It was David. I didn't pick up the first time, or the second. On the third call, I answered. Mom, he blurted out, not even bothering with pleasantries. I need you to come in, please. We're bleeding clients. Brittany's overwhelmed. The staff is upset. People keep asking for you by name. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch out. You said you wanted fresh leadership, I said evenly. I know. I was wrong, okay? We need you back. You know the clients. They trust you. You can fix this. I could hear the panic in his voice now, the same voice that once told me I was too old to keep up with modern times. Mom, please. We'll put you back on salary. You can have your old office. Whatever you want. He thought it was that simple, that he could pull me out of the drawer like a favorite old tool whenever he needed me. But I wasn't a tool, and I wasn't desperate anymore. I smiled to myself, a small private smile, because I already knew I wasn't going back. No, I had something better in mind, something he never saw coming, something that would leave him standing in the ashes of his own ambition. The call with David ended with promises. Promises I had no intention of keeping. As soon as I hung up, I brewed a cup of tea, sat by the window overlooking my small backyard, and opened my notebook. There, on a clean white page, I wrote 3 simple words. Start my own. I didn't need Harrington Co. I didn't need David's apology or Brittany's fake smiles. What I needed was a clean slate, and I had all the tools to build it. For 40 years, I had been the heartbeat of the business. I was the face the clients trusted. I was the one who stayed late, followed through, picked up the phone on a Sunday night when a deal was falling apart. The clients didn't come for the name. They came for me. It was time to remind everyone of that. I spent the next week quietly meeting with some of my oldest contacts. Lunches, coffees, casual chats. I never badmouthed Harrington Co. I didn't need to. I simply told the truth. I was starting a boutique consulting firm, focused on the same values we used to stand for. Personal service, loyalty, integrity. And if they ever needed someone who actually cared about their business, they knew where to find me. Word spread faster than wildfire on a dry August afternoon. One by one, the clients began to trickle over. Martin O'Connor was first. Then the Anders brothers. Then Mrs. Vaughn and her 2 daughters who ran their own retail business. Each one came with a quiet, almost guilty look on their face, like they were betraying something. But I reassured them, "You're not betraying anyone. You're just choosing what's best for you." In just 6 weeks, I had 15 major clients signed up under my new firm. Harper Consulting. Harper, my maiden name, before I ever became a Harrington, before I spent decades living under someone else's shadow. I rented a small sunlit office downtown, hired a sharp young assistant named Nora, who reminded me a little of myself at her age, hungry, loyal, smart, and together we got to work. Meanwhile, Harrington Co. was hemorrhaging. I didn't even have to dig for information. People loved to gossip. Brittany had no clue how to handle the loss of their largest accounts. The staff turnover was ridiculous. People were leaving weekly because the once respected company had turned into a sinking ship captained by amateurs. I knew David was floundering. I could feel it in the frantic voicemails he left, each one more desperate than the last. "Mom, please, just come in for a few months. Just help us stabilize." "Mom, we'll give you a full partnership again." "Mom, I'm sorry. Please call me back." I listened to each message, and I smiled. Because the thing about bridges is, when you burn them, you don't get to complain about being stranded. David hadn't just burned the bridge between us. He'd doused it in gasoline and thrown the match with his own hand. And now he was on his own. Exactly where he put me. It was a Tuesday morning when it happened. The office was quiet, the sun spilling through the wide windows onto the polished hardwood floors. I was sitting at my desk, sipping coffee and reviewing contracts when the front door creaked open. I looked up, and there he was. David, my son. The same boy I once stayed up all night rocking through fevers. The same young man I had cheered for at his graduation, clapping the loudest of anyone in the crowd. But the man standing in front of me now looked nothing like the boy I remembered. His shoulders slumped, his face pale, his eyes bloodshot, as if sleep had become a stranger to him. Behind him, Nora looked up from her desk, unsure whether to intervene. I gave a small nod. It was fine. Let him in. David shuffled toward my desk, clutching a worn leather folder under one arm. His hands trembled slightly as he set it down. "Mom," he croaked, "please, I need your help." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch and wrap around us like a second skin. Finally, he sank into the chair across from me, my client chair, and buried his face in his hands. "It's bad," he whispered. "We lost Weston Manufacturing. The Anders brothers pulled out. We're facing 2 lawsuits from former clients, and half the staff quit last week." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to fix it." For a brief, flickering moment, my heart squeezed. Because beneath all the arrogance, all the entitlement, all the betrayal, he was still my child. And seeing your child broken, no matter what they've done, is a pain you can never fully prepare for. But I stayed strong. I had to. "What do you want from me, David?" I asked, my tone gentle but firm. He swallowed hard. "Come back. Help me rebuild. You're the only one who can. Brittany's gone. She left last month when things started falling apart. Said she wasn't signing up for a sinking ship." He laughed bitterly. Guess loyalty wasn't part of the package deal. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. There was a time when I would have said yes immediately. A time when I would have swept him into my arms and promised to make everything better. But that time was gone. "David," I said softly, "you didn't just fire me. You dismissed everything I stood for. You replaced me with someone who didn't care about the company, the clients, or the people we built it for. And when it started to crumble, you didn't call because you missed me. You called because you missed what I could do for you. Tears welled up in his eyes. I was stupid. I was wrong. Please, Mom. I folded my hands calmly on the desk. David, I didn't build Harper Consulting to save you. I built it to save myself. His face twisted in confusion, and then pain as the realization settled. I wasn't coming back. Not now. Not ever. I stood, signaling the conversation was over. I hope you find your way, David. Truly. But you'll have to do it without me. He sat there for a few more seconds, as if hoping I might change my mind. I didn't. Finally, he rose, gathered his folder, the one that probably contained half-baked plans to resurrect what he had already destroyed, and walked out of my office. I watched him go, my heart heavy but clear, because sometimes love means letting someone fall, even if it breaks your own heart to watch. The door clicked shut behind him, and just like that, the chapter closed. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle, letting the finality of it sink into my bones. Then I walked to the window, looking out at the small but thriving downtown street, the heart of my new beginning. For the first time in decades, I wasn't tethered to anyone's expectations. Not Mark's legacy, not David's approval, not anyone's idea of what I owed them. I was free. Harper Consulting continued to flourish. Nora, bright, brilliant Nora, took on more responsibility each week. We expanded our services slowly, thoughtfully, never chasing size or prestige. Only trust. Only substance. Exactly the way it should be. Clients continued coming over, sometimes quietly, sometimes with loud declarations of relief. And with every new handshake, every new partnership forged, I felt a piece of myself healing. One sunny Saturday, I sat out on my small balcony, a cup of tea warming my hands when Nora called. Guess who just filed for bankruptcy? I smiled to myself. I didn't need to ask. David? Harrington Co. is officially closing its doors. End of an era, huh? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. End of an era, indeed. But not a sad one, because eras end when they're meant to, when they've given all they can give, and then something new begins. I didn't celebrate David's failure. I didn't need to. It wasn't about revenge, it never was. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I'd given away so freely over the years. The loyalty, the sacrifice, the love, all beautiful things, but they must be given wisely, to those who value them. I received a letter a few weeks later, handwritten, from David. He apologized again, sincerely this time, or at least it seemed that way. He talked about lessons learned, about regret, about hope for some kind of future relationship. I placed the letter in a drawer, not out of anger, but out of understanding. Sometimes forgiveness is quiet, private, a gift you give yourself, not the other person. I forgave him, but I didn't invite him back into my life, not fully. Some bridges are better left as memories. Instead, I built new bridges. I volunteered at the community center, teaching young women business basics. I traveled to places I'd only seen in magazines, Paris, Tuscany, the Scottish Highlands. I adopted a senior dog from the shelter, Charlie, a grumpy but lovable mutt who snored louder than any old engine. I lived, fully, fiercely, freely. And every time I walked into my office, past the simple plaque that read Harper Consulting, built on trust, I smiled. Because in the end, I didn't need to win against David. I just needed to win myself back. And I did.